Hey friends, Scott Barber here with day 14 of our fasting and prayer and our devotional here, walking through Colossians, and we're in chapter 3 now, verses 5 through 11. And we jumped in here yesterday on this passage where it talks about putting to death what's part of our earthly nature, the sin in our lives, and taking that seriously. That we need to start with our hearts, and the calling upon the Lord to help us hate what He hates, to love what He loves, and we can't play around with sin, and we got to treat it like a threat and not like a pet. And so let's jump back in here. Colossians chapter 3. I'm going to start with verse 1 and then get through verse 11 here. If then you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things here on earth. For you've died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with Him in glory. So put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, rage, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek or Jew, or circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. Put to death. All right, if we're going to kill something, then we've got to treat it like a serious threat to us. And we have the tendency to minimize our sin and treat it like a pet. You know, we feed it, we nurture it, we think it's this great thing, or it's not a big deal. But we don't realize that our sin is out to destroy us. And as I mentioned yesterday, John Owen, one old reformer, said, you got to be killing sin or it's going to be killing you. We got to take this serious. We can't treat sin like a pet. We got to treat it like a threat. We got to kill it. And so the question is, how? We got to look at these things here. Sexual immorality, taking sex outside of God's design. He's got a good thing planned for us. He created sex and sexuality as this beautiful thing, great thing for us as human beings. But He created it within a context. He has a good plan for this. And when we take it outside of His design, there's consequences. It hurts us. It hurts other people. Impurity, passions, all these evil desires, when we let things grow in our hearts, not just in our actions, it'll kill our hearts. It'll kill our minds, how we see other people. Men, how you see women. Women, how you see yourselves. And relationships, how we experience intimacy. We miss out on God's design. In fact, it becomes destructive in us. Idolatry, that's making any good thing a God thing in our lives, that we worship it. We need it. Anything. Sex, relationships, money, food, we can turn it into an idol. Our patriotism, anything, we can turn a good thing into a God thing. We worship it, we obey it instead of God. It destroys us. It goes on to talk about things like anger and wrath and malice. Like you being unhinged, you just letting yourself boil and let your thoughts go to places of harm for others, or just reacting and not being under self-control with your anger. Your anger is not necessarily a bad thing, but when you just let it ride in your heart, in your head, or in your actions, friends, it's sin. All right? Malice, enjoying bad things happening to other people. Come on now. Be honest with yourself. We do this. That's corrupting our hearts. There's really no difference between malice and murder. Now, we have a hard time coming to grips with that because it's not that big a deal. Oh, we just enjoy that person had a bad day. We enjoy that the person is suffering the consequences of their choices. You know what? By God's grace, we don't suffer all the consequences of our own choices. Listen, the sin in us is a threat, and it's threatening to kill you, your relationships, and above all, your relationship with God. We got to get real with it. We got to kill it. So how do we do this? How do we go about putting our sin to death? There's a variety of ways to think through this. We go for the kill shot. We stab it, we cut it up, we chop it up, we cut it out, whatever it may be. So Jesus talked about this. I know that's graphic. It's kind of weird, those terms, but bear with me here. Jesus said, if your hand's caught in sin, cut it off. If your eye's caught in sin, gouge it out. Now, he wasn't being literal there. What he was talking about is you got things in your life that are causes or encouragements to sin. You got to take radical action to remove it from your life. Listen, if there's certain friends in your life who are an influence and leading you to temptation and sin, if you being around them tends to, the correlation between you being with them and you giving into sin is there, you got to get rid of the friends. You got to move on, and you got to find biblical community. All right? If there's certain places that you go to or certain practices you're involved in, if you're on the internet alone and you're in porn, or you end up in chats with people you shouldn't be, talking about stuff that you shouldn't be talking about, if you're going to place, if the internet is a bad place for you to be alone, get off it, set up parameters, and let other people know. If you being isolated and nobody knowing what's going on in your life and you keeping stuff to yourself is not helping you be holy, but leading you towards sin, then friends, get in accountability. Get out of isolation. You can't trust yourself. We got to take radical action. If we're not going to treat sin like a pet, we're going to treat it like a threat, we got to take radical action in our lives. We got to cut things out. Okay? We got to cut things out. What do you got to cut out? You need to take some time to reflect today on the seriousness of sin and its destructiveness in your life. It's a threat to you. And if you don't be killing it, it's going to be killing you. And what kind of radical action do you got to take? One of the things you can do is starve that sin. Starve it. How do we do that? You got to stop feeding it, giving into it, if you will. You got to feed something else. You got to feed your spirit. What are you feeding yourself? How are you feeding the Spirit inside you? Are you getting in the Word? You know, this time of fasting and prayer is to jumpstart our lives and to get into holy habits. All right? We got to feed the Holy Spirit in us. We got to receive the Holy Spirit, to be filled with Him. Worship, times of worship, prayer, surrounding yourself with biblical community, pursuing that. Paul says to Timothy, 2 Timothy 2:22, flee the evil desires of youth. Flee. That doesn't mean like casually walk away. It's like run as if your life depended on it. Flee and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call upon the Lord out of a pure heart, along with others, along with righteous brothers and sisters. Get at it by building community. Get accountable. Get other people around you who are headed towards Jesus. Listen, we got to strangle this sin. We got to starve it by feeding the Spirit in us. We got to cut things out of our lives, practices, habits, people. We got to take it seriously, friends, if we're going to put these things to death. And friends, we got to get ultimately at the heart. Jesus, this prayer life, Jesus, I want you, help me, want your way. I need you. I'm powerless to these temptations and sin in my life, whether it has to do with addictions now, whether it has to do with lust of the flesh, whether it has to do with insecurities and anxieties, whatever it may be. I need you, Jesus. And friends, seeking Him, wanting Him and needing Him more than your fear, more than your anxiety, more than your revenge, your malice and unforgiveness. Seek Him. Receive from Him that grace and that power, and treat that sin like a threat and not like a pet. He's good. He will empower you. He'll meet you in this place, friends, and He's got better things for you. I hope you have a blessed day.